Welcome, everyone. I'm Vince Reddy with Land Studio, and I'm here today with my coworkers, Aaron Guido, Rita Tersini-Grabowski, Elizabeth Place, Adam Ironman, and we're happy to have with us today Kevin Beirne of Assured Partners. Today's Studio to the Street topic is insurance basics for artists, a very important topic, maybe not the most exciting one, but certainly one of the most important ones. Studio to the Street, as you know, is a program that's designed to provide artists with the skills and information they need to succeed in the public art world. And we've had several sessions over the past few months on different topics. We've done studio visits, visits to places that are resources for artists, panel discussions. And all of those are on the Studio to the Street website at studiotothestreet.com if you would like to view some of the sessions that you may have missed in the past. Today, as I said, we're going to be hearing from Kevin Beirne of Assured Partners. During the show, you might want to keep your view settings on gallery so you can see who's speaking. And Kevin is going to be sharing a presentation with us also. We will have a survey that will go out to you afterwards, and we just ask you to complete that so we can hear from you what worked and what didn't work in today's presentation. So before we get started, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Aaron. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I really thank you so much, Kevin, for being here with us. And I was just telling when we were starting that Kevin actually, for me personally as an artist, helped me get insurance too. So he's like the best. And just it's so nice that he was able to present for us. And also, everyone, this is a very small group. So like, feel free to turn on your camera and we can really, if you have specific questions for Rita or Kevin, we can just, talk about those too. So feel free to chime in with questions either in the chat or just turn on your camera since it's a small group. So.
And then I'm also going to, thanks, Aaron. I'm going to turn it over to Rita because as our person who always keeps us informed about legal requirements, insurance requirements, risks that we should avoid, Rita always has something to say. So I assume that today is not going to be any different. So Rita?
Rita always has something to say. All right, so just real quick, I'm a finance consultant for Land Studio, and I also help them with their contracts and things like that and their compliance issues. And insurance always ends up on in our area. And the biggest thing that I wanted to say is how important it is. But we asked Kevin to be here today because they're the experts. And Assured Partners has helped us, Land Studio, through many issues where we're not sure what our focus should be for different contracts, for different artists, and so using them as the expert, it's a really helpful tool. And so I encourage you all to, as you listen to Kevin, ask questions. It's a complicated topic, but that's why I go back with the same question. I think it's comical, actually. I go back with the same question many times and until it finally sinks in. So that's kind of what you have to do. So Kevin, Assured Partners, I'll let him talk about his company and how they can help you with many different insurance companies and things like that. But okay, go for it, Kevin.
All right. Well, thanks, Land Studio. You guys are a really valued customer of ours, and I appreciate the opportunity here to share some things on insurance. Again, not the most interesting topic, but a reality and a necessity in our lives and our business operations. So I've been in insurance 18 years now. I don't know how I got in insurance, but here I am. It was my destiny. So I will start my presentation here, assuming I could share the screen. All right. So this is just going to be a high level view of what insurance is. I'm not going to get into the weeds and anything. But as they said previously, feel free to stop me or ask me questions or interject or whatever you'd like to do. First things first, what is insurance? It's just a contract. It's a legal contract where the insurer is making a promise to pay a covered claim in exchange for your premium. So there's nothing too complex about that. We all know what a premium is, and we all know what a contract is. We want to focus on what an artist might need. And there are, hundreds of lines of insurance coverage out there, but I've identified a few that might apply. Not all these are going to apply to everyone, but these are generally what you'll see you would need, maybe from a contractual standpoint or just, protecting your everyday business. So I'm going to go through each one of these briefly, again, high level view, and just kind of give you an outline of what each represents. How much insurance do you need to buy? What limits do you need to carry? That's, generally speaking, for people in your world, it's going to be contractually driven. So you're going to enter into a contract, and the insurance obligations are going to be outlined there. Rita and I go through that all the time. And Land has their own specific requirements for those that come and work with them. And then we also have, what the government makes us carry, our auto liability insurance and those minimum limits. And then workers' compensation. The state makes us, as business owners and employers, carry workers' compensation. And then the third thing is just your personal appetite for risk. If you're not worried about your stuff or your liability and you think you can handle things on your own, if the worst happens, then, you might buy a lesser limit. You might not buy any coverage at all if you're not compelled to do so otherwise. So where do I get insurance? We would call it a direct or captive writer. This would be State Farm or Allstate or any of those guys you see in the strip malls with the company name up there. And there's nothing wrong with them. But juxtaposed to what we do here at Assured Partners, they're an independent agent. They're actually an employee of that carrier, whether it be State Farm or Allstate. We're an independent agent or broker, so we have hundreds of carriers that we can approach with things. And that's one of the main primary differences between us and them. And then the other thing, and a lot of people don't look at this, but if you belong to an association or you have a membership to an association, that's usually a good avenue to purchase insurance and very affordably, I might add. So for those of you who are involved in anything, you might want to look on the website or make a call and say, hey, do you guys have any offerings where we can purchase insurance through some sort of group plan at what tends to be a very reduced cost. I'm not really familiar with what our art associations might be out there, but maybe that's something we could talk about down the road, Rita. So those are 3 ways to purchase. The first thing we'd want to focus on is the property coverage. And it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you have your building, it's broken into essentially three different categories: your building, your business personal property, which would be your contents, and then business income and extra expense. So your building is just that, the structure you're in, the structure you own, the structure you lease. If you're leasing space, it's the landlord that's going to provide the building insurance. And that extends to glass and canopies and awnings and anything that's affixed permanently to the building itself. Where I'd see the most need for people in the art industry would be the business personal property, your contents. So if you think of a building and you turn it upside down, anything that would fall out would be your business personal property. And that could be office supplies, computers, desk chairs, other furniture, property that would be in your care, custody, and control, property of others. And I can see that being something that an artist might have. You'd want to make sure that you purchase a policy that would cover personal property of others, because that's not a given in any property policy. And then the third thing would be business income and extra expense. So this represents your loss of revenue if there is a claim. So in my world, I do a lot of manufacturing. So if a manufacturer has a fire and is no longer able to produce widgets or whatever he or she makes, the business income coverage would make up for any of that lost income. The extra expense would be a coverage that would allow them to maybe hire people to work off-site or work overtime, anything to keep production up. So this is a very, very important coverage that no one really seems to understand, but it's something that even an artist should have, because you need to produce. And if you're prevented from doing so because of a claim, you want to be able to get some revenue from the insurer because of that.
Kevin, could I just interrupt you for a second with the
Sure.
the business income insurance? How does that work with someone like a gig worker, like artists often are? Some years they'll have more income than others. Is the business income insurance tied to like an expected income for that year, or how does that work?
That can be written a number of different ways. I mean, typically you would have to fill out what's called a business income worksheet. And it's a formula that would spit out a monthly number that would be typical of your operation. And that's the limit you would have per month for a loss. But, for our purposes, we try to write it on what's called an actual loss basis. So there is no set limit. It's just, whatever actual loss is sustained. And these are messy claims because there's a lot of back and forth, and usually the accountant has to get involved. But generally speaking, for our purposes here as artists, we want an actual loss sustained business income coverage that wouldn't pin us to a specific limit. Did that answer you, Vince?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
Kevin,
Mhm.
if there actually has to be a loss, right? So there has to be a fire or something. How would this type of insurance apply to if the artist had a studio and there was a fire in their studio and they lost their, say they had art where they were working on a project where they were making, I don't know, whatever they were making, and they had that inventory in their office. Is this the insurance that would cover that, or will we cover that later?
Well, so for the physical property itself, we would go back up to this business personal property.
Right.
Right. So that would replace the canvases, the paints, the frames, whatever it might be, any raw materials that they might be using to make it. But this could get triggered here, this business income, if, they were commissioned to create a piece and now poof, it's gone. All the work they did is gone.
Okay.
The business income could be triggered there. That would be kind of a sticky claim, I think, because ultimately they would probably be able to recreate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there'd have to be some pretty creative accounting to figure out what actual value of loss there is there.
Okay.
With them having to start back over. But yeah, that would, both in that situation, Rita, the business personal property and the business income would probably both be triggered. All right. So not everything is covered by insurance, right? I think insurance kind of gets a bad rap a lot of times because not every claim is covered and people don't really understand that, hey, this is a contract that they're going to adhere to very strictly, they being the insurance company. So examples of covered causes of loss would be fire and wind and theft and vandalism. And that would be to your building and or your personal property. Some of the typical things we'd see excluded in a basic policy would be flood, which is only purchased through the federal government, by the way. Earthquake, wear and tear is something that we see a lot of people try to submit a claim for. And that could be, if you have a machine that's been running for 20 years and all of a sudden it breaks down and, nothing in particular caused it other than just old age. Some other examples of excluded causes of loss would be rust or corrosion, mechanical breakdown. And there are a ton of exclusions and a ton of covered causes of the loss. These are just some of the primary ones we might see. So some of the things I think an artist should look out for when they are purchasing insurance. You'd want your property coverage written on a replacement cost basis, not actual cash value. I see a lot of agents try to sell actual cash value. What that means, replacement cost means your art supplies would be paid for in full replacement if they are lost to, a covered cause of loss. Actual cash value would only pay you what they're valued at the time of the loss. So they'd appreciate it before the claim payment. I'm not going to get really into the weeds on co-insurance, but always tell your agent you do not want any co-insurance on your policy because that can only work against you. Essentially, if they deem you're underinsured, they're going to penalize you for being underinsured, and you do not want that. Another consideration, I'm sorry, I would think an artist would take his or her property away from the premises in which they work quite frequently, and that's something that needs to be considered. The property away 1,000 feet away from the premises is not covered anymore. Juxtapose your homeowners or renters policy where everything's covered everywhere. So you'd have to make sure your policy's endorsed and you have the right coverage in place for your stuff while it's in transit, on the road, or at a fair or an exhibition. So that's a very important thing for artists to consider.
Hey Kevin, just want to interject there. Deborah has a question. Please explain how depreciation work if there is a loss of equipment that is not new.
Yeah, so if they're going to depreciate something, and I used to be an insurance adjuster, so typically what they do, there's a federal depreciation guide that will, it lists, it's just millions of different types of property, and there's a depreciation schedule. So if you have a lathe or some sort of machine, you can find that on that guide, and it'll tell you, hey, this loses $1,500 of value per year. So the math would be done on that, and the claim payment would be based on that. Were you able to follow that? I'm sorry, I got it.
Deborah, does that kind of answer your question? She said, very good to know.
Okay.
So hopefully, yeah.
The other thing when it comes to property is, I'm assuming a lot of artists lease space. So you'd want your agent to review your lease agreement and the insurance requirements within to fully understand, the risk you're taking on. A lot of times these landlords will try to push things onto the tenant or lessee, and you want to make sure you have someone looking at that and looking out for your best interests. General liability, this is what Rita and I discuss a lot. So general liability, this is coverage for injury or bodily injury, bodily injury or property damage to a third party. So if you have an art gallery and someone comes in and slips and falls, if you're on a ladder and you drop something off that ladder and it falls onto someone or something, that someone or something is injured or damaged. And then, there's what we call products liability. So if you create a piece and it's on a canvas and you stapled or nailed that canvas to the frame and you didn't do a good job of it and someone ultimately ends up getting cut, and requires medical attention, the general liability would respond to that. The other thing that could potentially apply, we really don't see this that much, but personal and advertising injury would be libel and slander. To an extent, copyright infringement, invasion of privacy. If any of these allegations would be made against an artist, the general liability policy would respond to those. And then, a third area of coverage would be medical payments. And this is not a coverage I particularly care for, but if someone slips and falls on your property or is injured because of your product, even if you're not at fault, the insurance company will still pay for their medical bills up to a certain limit. It's usually about $5,000. And you'll see this coverage on most insurance policies. I have my own reasons for not liking it, but I'll keep those to myself for the time being.
What are your reasons for not liking it?
What's that?
What's your reason for not liking it?
I'll tell you, Aaron. So what happens is if someone comes in and slips in, say, a convenient food store, and it's through no fault of the store owner, and the insurance company says, okay, well, yeah, we see that you were injured on the property. Everyone agrees that it was no one's fault, but we do have money for your medical bills. Well, that money's going to run out, and then this person's going to get upset, and then they're going to get an attorney, and then they're going to file a lawsuit. It's better just to sever ties right there and say, hey, we're not at fault. We're sorry this happened to you. I know that sounds cold, but it's just, I see it. I saw it time and again as an adjuster. These medical payments are great for a couple of weeks, and then, the money runs out and feelings get hurt and people get upset and attorneys get involved. So I'm anti-medical payment. All right. Okay, coverage territory. When you buy a general liability policy, it's not worldwide. I see a typo here. Just the United States, Puerto Rico, and Canada. So I don't know how many of land. I don't know how many people extend out of the country, but that's definitely a consideration you want to have if you're doing some international work. The limit you're going to want to carry is no less than $1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. To carry any less than that really doesn't make sense either from a premium standpoint or in a risk tolerance standpoint. Rita and I have had that discussion in the past, I think. I think what you're going to see if you are entering into contracts is they're going to ask for more than that $1 million limit. I know land does, right, Rita? You're at $1 million? Okay.
$1 million. Yeah.
You're at $1 million. Okay. Well, I mean, we have this there's an ever evolving litigious environment going on right now. So people are requiring higher limits, and it's not going to be unusual for people to see a requirement of more than $1 million should they be entering into a contract. So that's
Kevin, is there a solution if you need general liability insurance to cover you if you're working in Europe or Africa or something?
Yes. Yeah, there are plenty. You can get a foreign liability package, and it's relatively cheap. Oh. And what that does also, Vince, is it provides coverage for you yourself and your employees if you have to be repatriated into the country, or if you have, God forbid, you get sick overseas. There'd be coverage for your employees or you, to seek the best medical help you possibly can in whatever country there might be. These carriers have contacts in every country, so they would direct you to the proper facility or doctor. So that's a good question. There is coverage available. It's affordable. It's broad, and it's good. It's good. All right. So one of the things we want to be considerate of as an artist is we do not want to assume the risk of others. If you're an artist that's hiring subcontractors, you're going to want to ask them for proof of insurance. I recommend asking for that $1 million limit. They should have that. You always want to be what's known as an additional insured on that subcontractor's policy, always. What that means is if through their work or their operation, a claim is created and you're named in the lawsuit, you'll be defended under their policy. So I can't overstate the importance of that. You don't want to use your own insurance or your own money for something that could be easily defended by someone else's policy. And then if, the adverse of that is if you're the sub, understand the risk you're assuming by entering into a contract, and always have an attorney or at least your agent look at, whatever you're being asked to sign, because all too often we see these companies, it might be just a very small operation and they sign an agreement and all of a sudden they're assuming the liability for a big corporation, and that's not ideal. So always have someone review your contracts. I'm happy to review anyone's contracts anytime. It's free. And I can always give you some input. Then also of importance, every contract is negotiable. Some of these contracts, and Rita, you go through this all the time. They'll ask for all these crazy coverages that would just be absolutely unapplicable to the situation at hand. So, just don't assume that that you can't negotiate these things. Rita, you're very good at that. So I applaud you for that. Employer's liability. This is not something that I think we really need to harp on. Workers' compensation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That's supposed to be the only remedy for an injured worker. So if you have employees and they get hurt on the job, workers' comp should be it. That should be the only thing that they're able to go seek relief from. But there's a rare occasion where if, an attorney can prove that an employer like Land Studio should have known that someone was going to get hurt and they sent that person into harm's way regardless, this employer's liability coverage, which is found on the general liability, would respond to that. But, that's not something we see too often. I think most of us understand auto coverage, so I won't get too deep on this either. But, the first party coverage would be your collision or your comprehensive collisions, you running into another car or a tree or an inanimate object. And then the comprehensive would be an animal hit or a theft or a fire or hail damage. So The other component of auto coverage would be your liability, which we're all required to by the government have a minimum limit. So I think we all understand that. So that would cover you for property damage or bodily injury to others because of your negligence. Hired and non-owned. This is important for companies that have employees. If you own a gallery and you have 10 employees and it's pretty routine for them to go run errands on your behalf or make deliveries on your behalf or be out on the roads in their own cars on your behalf, you're going to want this hired and non-owned coverage. So what this does, if that person, that individual or employee who's on the road on your behalf causes an accident, hurts someone, damages property, and you're named in a suit, in a lawsuit along with them, your policy would defend you with this hired and non-owned coverage.
Question.
Yeah.
Question, Kevin. So if I'm a self-employed artist, and I'm working, I drove my car while I'm on a job or whatever, have an accident during my work time, does my personal auto insurance policy cover that incident? Or do I need this? I don't have employees. I'm in a situation where it's just me. I don't have employees. Can you cover that?
I think in that situation, this is kind of a sticky one because it's a case-by-case thing. I'd have to see the personal auto policy in question. I would think generally you're going to get away with your personal coverage covering you for that scenario. And this wouldn't really apply because you own the vehicle.
Okay.
But it could potentially. It's hard for me to answer that, Rita. I'm sorry.
So the important thing with that is that if you're an artist and you're in this situation, it's a good question to ask your current carrier.
Yes.
What would happen? Because I know personally, they know I'm self-employed. So they ask, do you drive your car for business?
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the ramifications if you say yes, or if you say no? And what's the risk if you say no when you really are? And I guess that would be something that you would talk to your agent about.
You would.
And make sure it's one of those things that will fly under the radar.
Yeah. Unless you're a livery service or you're delivering something like pizzas or you're driving an Uber, they're probably going to cover you if you're in an accident, regardless if you're going to a business meeting or not. But it's still good to clarify that with your agent. Because I don't work on the personal side of things, and I don't know what exclusions are floating around out there in any given year. So, and kind of to that point, Rita, insurance is becoming more and more restricted. So they come up with new stuff to restrict coverage every year. So you do want to make sure that your personal policy is not going to completely bar you for a business accident. All right. So anyway, this is a very important coverage for those who have employees, and you'll see it a lot. It's going to be required in a lot of contracts too. So the umbrella, I had mentioned before that, we recommend, and we wouldn't even write anything less than $1 million per occurrence when it comes to general liability. And a lot of contracts are asking for more than just $1 million. And the way we achieve that is we add an umbrella to the policy. And an umbrella stacks on top of that general liability to whatever limit we need. So if we need a $5 million limit, we would buy a $4 million umbrella to put on top of the $1 million general liability. Does that make sense? All right. And then the umbrella goes over your general liability and your auto coverage. Mm-hmm. So that's the other important part. I mentioned work comp before. I don't have anything to do with work comp in the state of Ohio because it's monopolistic, meaning the state sells it. The state handles it. The state adjudicates the claims. If you ever have a problem with work comp, I'm more than happy to help you. Or if you're going to another state, I'm more than happy to help you. But we don't have a lot as an independent agent to do with work comp here in Ohio.
Kevin, sometimes it's confusing because, I think some contracts, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin or Rita, require you to have workers' comp, but if you don't have employees, like, why would you need to have it? Is there a reason to have it if you don't have employees?
Yeah, there is. I mean, your medical provider could still, they can exclude a claim from you if you're injured on the job, you know, because they're going to say, well, you should have had work comp. Too bad for you, Aaron. I mean, that does happen. But
Okay,
as an
so it's
employer,
not only to cover employees, it's
right,
to cover you too.
as an employer, you can opt out of it for yourself. And I think the majority do, but there's risk involved with that, Aaron, because like I said, if you have Medical Mutual of Ohio and they say, well, Aaron, you're clearly working, and we're not going to cover you because you should have had work comp. So I don't recommend opting out, but that seems to be the normal practice of most business owners.
Hi, Kevin. Okay, so what I would like to interject here is how the state of Ohio, and I'm only talking about Ohio because that's all really that I know. You can, if you're self-employed, you can elect coverage, which is what Kevin is talking about. If you have employees, you have to have coverage. There is no opting out.
Right.
But if you're self-employed and you're a one-person show, you don't have to have it. If you don't have it, you can buy an elective coverage. You can go to the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp website. It's $120 to file an application, and then you pay your annual premiums. Kevin already mentioned about the good part about that is that if you are injured yourself, you can claim workers' comp if you're injured when you're working. And the possibility of your health insurance not covering it could be an issue if you're disabled, and because of that incident, there's also workers' comp for payments for disabilities and things like that. So it depends. It's based on the premiums are based on how much you earn, basically. So if you're self-employed and you have to pay unfortunately, you have to pay the premiums now up front. It's not after you make the money you have to pay, but they adjust it. They adjust it to what you've actually made. So as a self-employed person myself, I do it. It's not that expensive for me personally to do. So I, of course, and I'm always encouraging Land to encourage our artists that we work with to do it, but it is not required.
That's important, Rita.
That was kind of, I wanted to give that.
That's very important because, you know, if you have this coverage and you're injured and you can't work, they're going to pay you, you know, as you would be paid if you were working. So your Medical Mutual of Ohio is not going to do that, but
right.
Workers' Comp would do that. So that is an important point.
Okay.
All right. Professional liability, you might see this come up in a contract that you are required to enter into. I think, Rita, this is one of the things that you're good about negotiating out of certain agreements, right?
Yeah.
And
Kevin,
what this is...
Kevin, before you go on, we have a question about to what you were just talking about. If you're employing independent contractors, do you have to cover them with workers' comp or any type of insurance?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, my
Kevin?
answer to that would be, again, we don't have a ton of work comp experience as independent brokers here. I would say that you could potentially be on the hook for that person's injury, even if they are just an independent contractor.
So what?
I would encourage you to carry workers' comp.
So what Land would suggest is that if the artist has contracts with subcontractors or with you, if you're telling them that they're in the same, if they're an individual and they don't have employees, they're in the same situation that you are. They can elect workers' comp or they cannot. It would be up to you from a contractual basis to say, we know you don't have to have it, but we want you to have it. So that the subcontractor is responsible, the 1099 person is responsible for themselves, and you're not responsible. But that has to be put in your contracts, and anybody can sue for anything, but that's at least your first line of defense. And say in your contracts, we're not responsible, and put it in your contract so that if they don't elect coverage, you're not responsible. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so anybody can sue for anything they want to sue, but at least that's a minimal line of defense there. But you can't, you as the artist cannot go to workers' comp and buy workers' comp insurance for that 1099 person. They have to buy it themselves, just like you would have to buy it yourself. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah, correct. Important to include in the contract.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of ambiguity as to who's an employee and who's not in the eyes of the courts. And some judges have said, no, I don't care if he's an independent contractor. He's still an employee. And, you failed your duty to carry workers' compensation for this employee. I mean, I've seen it happen. So.
Okay. That's a good point, Kevin.
Yeah.
Every situation would be different.
Right. We're big in construction here, and some of our guys only hire independent contractors to work on their behalf, and they've been burned before on that. So if you have a question about work comp, definitely go to your, maybe consult an attorney even, because that's not something you want to be on the hook for. All right, good question. I was going to touch on the professional liability. Again, this is something you'll see in a lot of contracts. And the difference between professional liability and the aforementioned general liability is general liability is injury or damage resulting from your work. And this would be, professional liability would be a failure to perform your work. So this is a more applicable coverage for architects, engineers, CPAs, insurance brokers, stuff like that. But I mean, you could see some scenarios where it might be beneficial for an artist. And one thing I thought of off the top of my head was if you failed to deliver what you promised to a gallery or to a show, and that resulted in an economic loss for whomever had hired you to do that, that would be a professional liability claim. But again, I don't think many artists are going to carry this. It's just potentially going to be a requirement in some contracts. And for your sake, hopefully one you could probably negotiate out of there, like Rita does so often. And then the management liability, and this is more geared towards those who have a lot of employees or more than a couple employees. Directors and officers, I'm not going to get too far into that, but this employment practices is the hot button in the world of insurance right now, because these claims of harassment, wrongful termination, discrimination, they're out there. And, an employment practices liability policy would defend you against those allegations. So if you do have multiple employees, I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to carry that coverage, because you can do everything right, but in the eyes of an employee, they were mistreated and they're going to come after you, and you want something that's going to protect you. So that's the one I'd highlight there. Crime is another one. If, this is essentially employee theft. So if you have employees that have access to money, your money, you're going to want a crime policy. And that could be written in a number of ways, but that's not covered under the property policy. You need specific coverage for that. And then cyber is the other hot button thing that we're dealing with right now. We see quite a few cyber claims, and that'd be ransomware, where someone takes over your computer and demands, X amount in Bitcoin for them to release it back to you. Social engineering. I see this at least once a month, where one of my clients gets an email and it looks like it's from his or her boss saying, wire money to XYZ account. And it was just a cloned email, and poof, that money's gone. So cyber is something everyone's going to carry eventually. Most are carrying it now, and something I would encourage everyone to carry. Right, Rita? All right, so that's it on the management liability. There's a lot here, but I'm not gonna get too deep into that. And then the points I just wanted to kind of hammer home here is don't assume that your homeowners or renters policy is going to extend to what you're doing from a business standpoint. It's probably not going to. You know, you might be able to get away with an auto accident or something like that, but you're going to want to look at that policy, ask your agent about it, ask if you can endorse that policy on the cheap, you know, to extend over your business property and operations. But if not, you're going to want to go to a commercial broker and see what you can get there. You know, not having commercial coverage could really result in the loss of your personal assets. And it happens. No one wants to pay for insurance, but, you know, no one wants to lose their house, their cars, other property. Read your contracts, ask for people to look at your contracts. You do not want to be taken advantage of, and there are plenty of people out there willing to help, including myself. Always transfer your liability down to the subcontractor when you're asking them to sign a contract. That's important, and we can help with that. And then I know I sound biased, but I'm going to encourage you to all approach an independent agent if and when you do buy commercial insurance, because buying through State Farm or Allstate, you're buying from one of their employees. You don't have an advocate. They're not going to be your advocate, right? If something happens with one of my clients, you know, now the fight's on. You know, I want to make sure that these carriers are doing what they promised to do. And, you know, these direct carriers like State Farm and Allstate, they're not going to be that advocate for you. And we see it so often. So that was the long and the short of it. Is there anything else, Rita, you think I should?
There's a question from Deborah. Is it possible then to get, I think we're back on the workers' comp issue. Is it possible then to get a temporary rider on my own policy? Deborah, are you talking about your workers' comp policy? Is Deborah still here?
Yes.
Yeah.
He said
Okay.
yes.
I don't know the answer to that question. The best thing to do is to research and talk to Bureau of Workers' Comp. And I haven't talked to the Bureau for a while. I know they're, but I have had instances where I've, you know, actually had conversations with people from there. So you might get a good response by talking to them. But I have to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. My guess is no, but I don't know.
What would she want to get a rider for? I guess I didn't understand.
Using 1099 employees with their business.
So, you know, that is a good question.
Yeah, and I would go directly to them because they're in control. They totally control.
I think there's something you might be able to do there that would endorse your policy to extend over a 1099.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
She's thinking of doing a mural for someone using helpers. So that's what she's talking about.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know, Kevin, if there's any research you could do, but that would be my advice.
I lost you. I'm going to look into that a little bit further and I'll get back.
Deborah, if land was hiring you to do that, we would say, okay, we want you to have workers' comp and we want your subs to have workers' comp. And if they don't, you're responsible or they're responsible if there's any injury, and land would not be. You would see that written in a land contract as the example.
But it sounds like this is a scenario. This is probably a scenario where these helpers are not going to buy a workers' comp policy.
Well,
right.
It could be, yes. Yeah. Don't want them to get, Deborah says, I don't want them to get hurt and maybe sue me or as the business owner. Yeah. Or the business owner. Oh, yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I would say, Deborah, is that make sure they understand that it's in their you have it in the contract, but we always want to make sure that people understand their contracts, because I mean, people can sue for no matter what. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but that's just the world that we live in. Mm-hmm. I think we all know that.
And workers' comp is usually like really cheap. It's like $50 or something, right? Isn't
workers' comp? The application is $120 right now. And then you have to pay your premium based on your wages / income. And you have to pay that up front. So yeah, you could get you'll pay something up front beside once you apply. And it's
And does
accepted.
the 120 is that Pratt? Would it be 120 for the year or for the
No,
project?
the $120 is the application to apply for elective coverage. That's it. It's $120. You do it one time, unless you cancel your coverage, and then you have to probably pay it again if there's a lot of time that's lapsed. But
It's a
if you
shakedown.
bought work,
That 120 is a shakedown.
pardon me.
It's a shakedown, that 120 application.
Oh, that's so expensive.
Okay, Kevin. Kevin's. It's an application fee.
That's a really expensive application fee.
I know.
It used to be, Aaron, it used to be when I did it, it was $50.
It used to be $50.
Years ago, it was $50.
Yeah.
120 now. I looked this morning to make sure. Okay, what other questions? I'm turning my thing off.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if there are any other questions, now would be a good time to ask. You can just blurt them out. And if not, we would like to ask Kevin and Rita if they have any last words of wisdom to share with the group.
Well, I'll just say, again, thanks for the platform here. If anyone needs any help, please give me a call. I'm happy to help anyone, anytime. And that's all I had, Rita.
Kevin doesn't have an application fee.
No.
No,
Yes.
that's good.
Maybe I should. I don't know.
And my closing comment would be that it's a good thing to look at. Insurance is a good thing not to ignore. You don't want to just wait until you get into a situation that could cause you pain to look at it, and think of it as a business expense and a necessary business expense to build your business and be able to cover yourself and those that work with you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kevin and Rita, for putting the show together today. It's very informative, and the information is very important. So again, and thanks to everyone who participated today. We will be sending out just a survey to just get your feedback on the presentation today, which we would appreciate if you could get back to us.
And just want to note, there's one more Studio to the Street event next Friday, which is more of a panel discussion with the topic of making public art your career. So we'd love you to join us then too, if you'd like. And thanks again, Kevin and Rita. Everyone's saying thank you in the chat.
Yeah. And Deborah's saying specifically that she used to sell life and health insurance.
Yeah, that's the real shakedown.
That's the real shakedown.
It's true.
All right, Deborah, you know more than we do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
Happy
Thank
Friday.
you.
See you.
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.